So this lecture, we'll be dealing with Z indexing with positioning. So in the previous lecture, we spoke about the different types of positioning that exist. Now I'm going to talk about Z indexing. Now Z indexing is about the order in which the elements will be stacked if they were to overlap. So for example, if I were to take this child element and if I were to move it up to a certain position, right, what's the order in which they would stack? In other words, which element would appear on top and which element would appear at the bottom when these two sort of overlap. So let me just demonstrate this. So I'm just going to go child 4 and I'm just going to set the position to relative in the following way: position relative. And then for child 3, I will also go position relative. The important thing to note here is that Z index only applies to non-statically positioned elements, right? So your relative, absolute, I think it's fixed too, and sticky. So as long as it's non-static, the Z-index property will work. For now, I'm just going to go relative. And after I've gone relative, now I'm just going to take this child element and just move it to the top. So I'm just going to move it from the bottom up. So bottom, and then I'm just going to go 60 pixels. So there should be some overlap now. If there is some overlap, however, we notice that this is sort of obstructing the contents of child 3. So for example, let me just move it to the left a little bit. So I just go right and I just say 10 pixels just so it becomes more clear. And if I were to set this child, the third child, into a higher Z index, that means it will appear in front of the fourth child element. So let me just demonstrate this. So I'm just going to go to child 3 and I'm going to go Z index in the following way. And here it has to take an integer value. So a value that is higher than the value of another element will be the one that's positioned in front of that element. So let me just demonstrate this. So for example, if I say Z index 3, for example, so now it should be higher than the fourth child here. And what if I were to go to the fourth child and I want to increase the Z index in the following way? So Z index, and let's just say I made it 4 now. It has to be an integer value, and there you go. So now it has higher precedence, so it stacks on top of. So the higher the Z index, the greater the precedence of which one would stack on top of the other. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. So thank you very much.